This is Midwest Moxie, a show about our region's visionary founders and the experiences that shape them. I'm your host, Kathleen Gallagher, Executive Director of Five Lakes Institute. Vishal Singh had used his autonomous drones to collect data from turf grass plots and to take images of plants. But cattle were a whole different story. Once he figured out the ranchers had problems monitoring the health of the herd, he set out to find a solution. Ultimately, Vishal dropped the drones to build a data and analytics company whose unique ear tags monitor the cattle's body temperature and movement to detect illness. Lincoln-based Quantified Ag raised about $7 million and had 11 employees. Then, in 2020, Merck Animal Health, already one of its investors, bought the company for an undisclosed price. Vishal, welcome to Midwest Moxie.
Kathleen, thanks for having me on your podcast here.
You came to the U.S. from India when you were 8. Your father, a Methodist minister, moved the family to rural Nebraska, where he was going to be pastor of a church. Despite
hmm
that, you had no interest in a career in agriculture. Tell us how your experience leading this interactive tech team at University of Nebraska's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources lured you into agriculture.
Yeah, so I had a tech background and I worked in the Institute of Ag and Natural Resources. And for most of my time there, I was one of the team members. My work, for the most part, dealt with interactive media, user interface design, that sort of stuff. And it was kind of towards the tail end of my time there that I went on to lead that team of people. But it was great timing for me because leading that team of people involved leading, user interface designers, software developers, content experts, which is more or less the same type of team that I had to lead for my startup.
Oh, good point. I never thought of that. So you learned being there as well about startups and startup culture, and you started using your autonomous drones to get information about a University of Nebraska researcher's turf grass plots. And he couldn't pay you as a university employee, which is what made you start the company to begin with, right?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. So I was already a university employee, and what I was doing on the side had really nothing to do with what I did for my job at the university. So there was no conflict of interest, there per se. It was okay, and I checked in with the university higher ups, and there was no problem with me doing this stuff on the side. The only problem was that if this department wanted to work with me, on a more regular basis and actually pay me for my work, they couldn't pay me as the university employee. They had to, they could pay a company, and so therefore I created a company that they could work with.
Well, and then, you were increasingly lured in. You had this company and you had a friend and a mentor who suggested you apply to N Motion, the University of
Yeah.
Nebraska's accelerator. That's how you started thinking about the company, right? And identifying the problem you wanted to solve.
Yeah, well, okay, so when I was doing the drone work, at first it was just that one department at university. After that, I started getting more incoming interest, whether it was people from other universities or even people that were crop consultants here in Nebraska. There was some incoming interest. So, and I would meet up with this friend slash mentor. His name is Dr. Tom Field, and he leads the Angler Entrepreneurship Program at UNL. Anyway, I would meet up with him and bounce ideas off of him, tell him things I'm working on, and he's the one who suggested, hey, that okay, it sounds like you're ramping up this entrepreneurial effort. It might make sense to go through a startup accelerator, and so I did, and it was really good because I was already starting to think a little bit that, okay, I'm doing this drone work, but so are a whole lot of other people. They're doing almost exactly the same types of drone work where they're trying to use drones for crop imaging or other plants and things like that. So I needed to figure out a way to differentiate what I was doing if I was going to make it into a successful business of some sort. So it was perfect timing and a perfect segue for me to go into the startup accelerator and try to adapt what I was doing to the livestock sector instead.
So you ended up talking to a lot of ranchers, and that made you sour on the drones. How come?
So honestly, I was pretty enamored with the drone still. I still really wanted to do the whole drone thing because I just thought it was cool and interesting and fun. But as I was interviewing people in the cattle industry, and oftentimes these were managers of medium to large size feedlots. So I would talk to them about, okay, I would validate that yes, they're having this problem. Yes, they were interested in having the problem solved for them, and that there's a likelihood that they would pay to have the problem solved for them. But then when I got to how they would want to have the problem solved for them, and when I would bring up the drones and that type of thing, we always kind of got a little hung up because for several reasons. One was at that time, there were no really solid FCC regulation or FAA rather regulations about drones and if you can offer drone services. So it was still up in the air about, well, am I going to offer a service or am I offering a product? Either way, it was problematic for the feedlots because one, these feedlot managers and their crews get up pretty early in the morning to get to work. And they have a whole long list of things that they have to get done for the day, whether it's feeding the animals to whatever to run these facilities. So the way that one feedlot manager summarized it to me was he just wanted to wake up in the morning and he just wanted to get a list of which animals to focus on for that day. And if he could get that, that would be, the perfect thing that he would want. And then once I knew that, I validated it with other feedlot managers, and they were telling me very similar things. So that seemed like the right way to go.
So you begrudgingly gave up the drones and you went toward this ear it's something an ear tag that would take the temperature,
Yes.
but you did use some of the drone technology. You used the accelerometer, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess there is a little bit of crossover in the sense that the IMU, the main board on a drone, it utilizes accelerometers, gyros, those types of sensors. And yes, the ear tag also has an accelerometer on it as well.
So not only does the ear tag record the temperature of the animal, it also tells you how much it's moving around.
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does measure activity levels and yeah.
So you went from drone service to a real big data analytics play using these ear tags, getting the data from these ear tags. Mm.
Yes, that is correct because just to kind of put things in context here, this was around 2014, 2015 timeline. And around then, you were starting to see a lot of wearables come on the market for humans. Like, for example, I think back at that time, I had the Jawbone up. It was like a little armband that had an accelerometer in it, could measure your activity or sleep patterns. And those types of devices were just coming on the market. So it was like, oh, that's kind of, that was inspiring. So, yeah, so these tags would gather uh, ear canal temperature readings throughout the day for the animals. And then also it would get the accelerometer readings, which translates to activity patterns. And what they would do is that individual ear tags would send that data to a central base station. The central base station could gather data for up to thousands of animals, and it was constantly dumping all this data to our cloud servers. And what would happen there is individual animals will be compared to themselves for the last several hours or even several days, as well as their readings were being compared against animals in the same pen or lot number. And so these types of comparative analyses would help identify the sick animals much, much sooner than what people could do on their own.
So Fitbit for cattle, in a sense, right?
Yep, yeah, you could say Fitbit for cattle. Yep.
Tell us about the day everything got real. When you had the conversation with the feedlot owner that prompted you to quit your job at the university and go for it.
Yeah, so at that time, I was still doing this startup thing kind of on the side. It wasn't a like a serious gig for me just yet. And there was a feedlot manager that I had talked to for my customer development interviews early on. And I had reached back out to him once I had a really rough prototype of this ear tag, which was based off a development board. And I just wanted to go get some, real world feedback from somebody who actually does this for a living, to see what they thought about it, if I was moving in the right direction. And he gave some really good feedback. And also he was really liking the direction I was headed. So without me asking about it, he suggested that to really bring this type of product to market is going to require a lot of funding. And if I was going to seek funding, he was very interested in becoming an investor in the company. And so that was a big wow moment for me, that okay, I've got somebody who is a potential direct customer, not only saying that this is something that they need, but they're willing to go so far as to even invest in the idea. So I'm obviously onto something, and that was really the transition. It went from being this little side gig thing to it turned into my full time focus.
You raised a lot of money from ranchers ultimately, and then you sold to Merck Animal Health. It's been 4
Yes.
years since you sold Quantified
Mhm.
Ag, and you haven't gotten
Yeah.
a different job, you haven't started another company, you have a lot of hobbies. Why haven't you gotten a job or started a company?
Sure, that's a fair question. Well, in the beginning, I thought I would just take a very short break, and then that break, I kind of liked it, and it just kept extending further and further. And I think maybe someday I'll probably will do something again. I don't know what that thing will be. I've played around with different ideas, whether it's startup ideas or other opportunities, but nothing has necessarily really resonated with me just yet. So there's a good chance I'll do something, but I just have to say that this is definitely something I think all startup founders eventually, if you're successful, you kind of have to wrestle with it a little bit, because the moment that you decide to become a startup founder, mentally, you're making the transition to where you're accepting that, okay, from this moment onwards, I'm likely going to go down a much different path than most other people will. And so you're no longer bound to those conventional thinkings about how that should play out. So once that happens, it's really then hard to go back to that conventional type of thinking.
Well, Vishal, thank you for sharing your story. We're going to look forward to seeing when or if you jump back in again. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you very much, Kathleen.
You can read more about today's guest by visiting wuwm.com. Don't forget, you can listen to the show as a podcast if you'd like to take us on the go. Just search for Midwest Moxie wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Kathleen Gallagher. Midwest Moxie was created by executive producer Audrey Nowakowski and me. Today's episode was produced by Audrey Nowakowski and engineered by WUWM's Jason Reevy. Join us next Sunday at 7 p.m. to hear from more visionary Midwestern founders building innovative companies. That's right here on 89.7, Milwaukee's NPR. Support for Midwest Moxie comes from Microsoft, whose efforts to drive technology development across the Midwest and beyond include its National TechSpark community engagement work, which started in Wisconsin, its role as co-founder of Titletown Tech in Green Bay, and its new AI co-innovation lab at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. More information is available at Microsoft.com. And from Quarles and Brady LLP, a multidisciplinary Am Law 200 firm with approximately 550 attorneys who support large and small businesses, from Fortune 500 companies to startups and entrepreneurs across the country. More at quarles.com.